Good morning, creative and crafty people. I hope y'all are doing well today. In this video, I'm going to show you 4 different clasps that I use in a lot of my pieces. The first 3 are beginner friendly. The last one, a bar clasp, is a bit more of an intermediate level and may require a smaller gauge wire for you to practice with. So if you are interested, then follow along and watch how I create these clasps. So to get started, we're going to need some materials. I'm going to use some 18 gauge copper wire for all of my clasps. As I stated in the intro, you may want to use 20 gauge wire for that last clasp, the bar clasp. So first, for the smaller clasp, we're going to need a piece of wire cut at 4 centimeters. The second clasp, it's a little bit larger, you'll need 4.5 centimeters of wire. For the third clasp, we're just going to make the same clasp basically, but double, so it's 9 centimeters of wire. And then lastly is this bar clasp. You'll need 2 pieces of wire. One, the smaller piece cut at 6 centimeters, and the larger piece cut at 10 centimeters. Next, you'll need a pair of looping pliers, a pair of chain nose pliers, a pair of bent chain nose pliers, a pair of flush cutters, a chasing hammer, and a bench block. This concludes the materials we'll need for this project. If you missed something from the materials list, you can either re-watch this part of the video or simply go and check out the materials list in the description below this video. Now let's get started on this project. First, we're going to start on this little clasp. I call this an S-clasp or figure 8 clasp. We're going to grab that 4 centimeter piece of wire and the looping pliers, and around the 2 millimeter mandrel, I'm going to wrap that tail end until it meets up with itself, like so. So now we've created a little loop at the end here, and we're going to take that loop and place it between the 4 and 5 millimeter barrels. So I'm going to have the loop face the 4 millimeter barrel and then wrap the tail end around the 5 millimeter barrel, bringing that tail all the way back around until it forms a little figure 8. Like so. And there you can see that little figure 8. And now I'm going to grab my chain nose pliers, and I'm going to grab the wire on the top right side of the bottom loop, just to the inside of that top part. And then I'm just going to scoot it over about 1 centimeter. And then I'm going to bend the tail end of that wire back to the right, past the 90-degree angle mark. And then with my chain nose pliers, I'm going to cut the tail end part of this off, leaving a little bend at the end of that clasp. And there is the completed first clasp. Simple and easy. Now the second clasp, we'll need the 4.5 centimeter piece of wire. And we're going to make this little clasp right here that I'm wearing on my bracelet. This one is also pretty simple to do. So we're just going to grab the tail end of that wire between that 2 and 3 millimeter barrel and wrap the tail end around the 2 millimeter barrel. Making a loop, we want the tail end to meet back up with itself once again. Getting that full loop all the way around. And then I'm going to grab my chain nose pliers and grab inside of the loop, and then bend the tail end of the wire straight down so it's perpendicular to your loop. With my bail making pliers or looping pliers, I'm going to bend that loop back into place. Make sure it's completely closed. And now, with the tail end of this loop being on the bottom side of my wire, I'm going to loop up toward the top side of the wire for this clasp. So grabbing my looping pliers, I'm going to be grabbing between the 4 and 5 millimeter barrels, and I'm going to wrap the tail end of the longer part of the wire around the 5 millimeter barrel. So up and over that 5 millimeter barrel. We want the tail end of this wire to be on the opposite side of the base of the wire than the other tail end. And then we're going to bring it down to cross over itself, like so. So make a little teardrop shape there. Now grabbing my looping pliers, I'm going to use the 2 millimeter barrel once again, and we're going to make a little loop with the tail end of this wire. Again, bringing it all the way around so that it touches back to itself, making a nice tight little loop. Like so. And now I'm going to reinsert the wire back onto the looping pliers just to bring that back together. Sometimes while making these things they come apart a little bit, so we're just going to push it back together. And now we've finished our clasp, unless you'd like to hammer it to give it that extra shine and a little extra firmness. So grabbing my bench block and a chasing hammer, I'm going to give a few taps on this clasp. And then with my looping pliers, I'm going to go ahead one last time and just get that back into shape from hammering. Sometimes it spreads that wire out a bit. And make sure that my loops are all nice and closed up. And there's the completed clasp. Again, nice and easy. So my next clasp is this doubled clasp. I use these a lot in my men's bracelets because they tend to be a little bit rougher with their bracelets than women are. And I'm going to grab the 9 centimeter piece of wire. So here I'm going to grab my chain nose pliers and grab that wire at about midway. And we're going to make a bend in this wire because I'm going to fold this wire in half. Like so. Try to get it as close to the center as possible. And then we're going to pinch the end of this as tight as possible. You want to go slow and gently with this so you don't mar your wire. And there I've got that pressed about as far as I'm going to get it together. And here you can see I've got slightly more wire on one side than the other, and I want these to be even. So I'm going to grab my flush cutters, make sure they're facing the right direction, and flush cut the end that's a little bit longer to the other end, like so. Now they're the same length. So now I'm going to grab my looping pliers, and again with the 2 millimeter barrel, we're going to wrap the tail end of those wires together to form our loop around that barrel, bringing it all the way around till the tail end meets back up with itself once again. So basically all these clasps start off the same way, making that first initial loop with the 2 millimeter barrel. Now as you can see, we've got our loop made and it's nice and even because you did it all at once, not separately. And now we're going to make our loop straight up. So we're going to grab chain nose pliers, grab inside this loop like we did the last one, and we're going to push that tail end straight down perpendicular to our loop, like so. And then we're going to make sure that loop is closed up nice and tight, So I'm just going to use my chain nose pliers and snug it up right there like that. Making sure both sides are good and snugged up. Like so. You can also put them back on the looping pliers and do it that way. I just chose to do it this way. And now we're ready to make our next bend. So grabbing the looping pliers and the tail end of that wire being the opposite direction of where the tail wire is going, the opposite tail wire is going to go. So the tail of the loop that we made is on the bottom of this base wire, and now we're going to take the tail of the longer part of this wire and wrap it around the 5mm barrel. So here you can see we're wrapping it up and around so that the tail end of this wire is on the opposite side of the base wire here. And we're going to wrap it around till the tail end of that wire touches the loops, or the loop. And with my chain nose pliers, I'm going to grab the tail end and just make a little bend outward, like so. And there we've completed the double clasp. And this is great, like I said, for people who want a very strong clasp. Now the last clasp. This is my bar clasp. This is a little bit more difficult to do, but I have faith in you. I believe you can do it. You can start off by using 20 gauge wire if you'd rather. I prefer using 18 gauge, but it is more difficult to use. We're going to place the 6cm piece of wire to the side and just focus on this 10cm piece, which I've marked 1 inch from the end. And then I've placed another mark about 12mm from that 1 inch mark. So we're going to focus on this first mark and grab with our chain nose pliers just to the right side of that 1 inch mark. And then we're going to make a bend. And we're going to bend that wire all the way back around, because we're going to fold this wire right where we've made that bend. But before I fold this wire, I'm going to grab this top tail end of the wire and make a little bend up. It's just going to make it easier here in just a minute. And then we're going to pinch the end of this closed. Like so. Making it as tight as possible. And see how I've made that little bend there, about halfway across that 12cm little span. And now I'm going to grab on the other side of that 12mm span, right on the other side of that mark, like so. And then we're going to make another bend all the way back and fold that down on itself. And with my chain nose pliers, I'm going to pinch this end nice and snug. Just like this. There we go. And now we want to make a bend in this other tail end we just bent over. So we're going to bend that right at about the same place the other bend is from the other tail end of the wire. And you can see where those wires intersect each other. So we want to bend that wire right about there. So with my chain nose pliers, I'm now going to bend this straight up at a 90-degree angle. And now we're going to wrap the smaller tail end of the wire around this longer tail end of the wire. So I'm going to take my chain nose pliers and grab the side of that bar where the longer side comes out of it, and then start wrapping that shorter side around the longer side. I'm hoping this makes sense. So here you can see I'm going to grab the side of the bar of the longer tail that comes out of the top of that bar. That's the side I'm grabbing on to hold onto the tightest so it doesn't get misshapen. And then I'm going to grab my bent chain nose pliers to pull that tail end around that longer wire. We want that to be nice and tight and snug around there. So here you can see I'm going to take my time about getting it nice and tight using those bent chain nose pliers. And we're going to wrap this wire around there 2 times. So here I've got 1 complete wrap, maybe 1.5. I'm going to go continue to wrap that around until we've got that 2 times around completely. And then come back around to the back side of the bar clasp. Once I get back to the back side, I'm going to flush cut the end of that wire off so that it's right in the middle of that base wire as much as possible. So here you can see the front side with the 2 wraps. I'm going to push those wraps down and adjust to make sure that it's nice and straight and tidy. And then we're going to flip this around, and then we're going to grab the chain nose pliers right above the last wrap and make a nice little 45-degree angle. Grab my looping pliers and wrap that wire around the 2mm barrel, making a nice little loop. Like so. And now we're going to take that tail end of the wire, after grabbing my chain nose pliers and grabbing a hold of that loop, we're going to grab that tail end and wrap it around the base of this wire. We're going to wrap it around about 1.5 times. So there's 1 time, maybe it's more like 2, but it goes all the way around until the tail end of this wire will meet back up with itself. We want to make sure that when you're wrapping your wire, it comes the opposite direction of the wraps you did previously so that those ends match up with each other. And you'll see what I mean here in just a second. I'm going to grab my bent chain nose pliers and press the tail end of that wire down into the wraps. And look how that's nice and flush in there. You can almost not see where those ends meet up. And there it's nice and smooth, not scratchy or jagged. And then we're going to press those wraps together. And there you can see that completed bar clasp, or the bar part of the clasp. Now grabbing our 6cm piece of wire and our looping pliers, we're going to grab this wire at the center between the 7 and 9mm barrels and wrap that wire around that 9mm barrel, making a loop where the wires just intersect each other, like so. And we're going to grab just to the inside of that circle where they intersect with our chain nose pliers and pull one of those tail ends up straight so it's perpendicular to the loop. And then with my chain nose pliers, I'm going to grab the side of the loop that we're going to start wrapping this wire around. Now here I'm going to switch back over to the looping pliers in a moment because I find that holding the shape is easier when you use your looping pliers. So I'm going to try here to show you as I start to wrap. I just feel like I don't have the best of control. So there I put it on the looping pliers. And now finishing wrapping those wraps. And again, I'm wrapping about 2 full wraps around. And I happen to have just enough wire to get those 2 full wraps. So be careful and make sure you have enough wire on that side to wrap. Now with my chain nose pliers, I'm going, or in this case my looping pliers, I'm going to make a bend in this wire. at about a 45 degree, and then with the tail end I'm going to wrap it around the 2mm barrel, make a loop. I'm sorry, I went off camera here, but that's what I'm doing. I made a loop with that 2mm barrel at the end of this wire. And I had just enough wire, so you may want to use a little bit more wire than the 6 centimeters that I did, maybe a 7 or 8 centimeters to make sure you have enough wire. And now we're going to hammer this loop that I've created just to make it nice and firm so it doesn't go out of shape very easily, and it just gives it a nice little shine. And I'm also going to hammer the other loop on the other side just so it all matches. You don't have to do this. I just like the way it looks. And make sure that loop is nice and straight. And then I'm going to hammer that. And then make sure that loop is nice and tight. There's the finish loop. And now you can see how this works. Goes in nice and neat and tidy and comes right back out. A nice little clasp for a bracelet. So there are all 4 of the clasps complete. Which one do you like best? Do you like any of these? Or do you like all of them? Which one would you use in most of your projects? And how confident are you in making the bar clasp? I have confidence in you. I bet you can do it. Give it a try. Let me know how it went. So for those of you who stuck it out to the end of this video, I want to say thank you. Thank you for all of your support. I also want to let y'all know that I've reached 2 new milestones. 1 more subscriber will put me at 2,000 subscribers. Wow. Thanks, guys. Also, I can now offer membership to any of my fans who wish to get to know me a little better and get a few extra perks that my regular subscribers may not get. If you'd like to be a part of that, just go to my channel and click the join button to see more details. Please be patient with me in this process, as it is all new to me and I'm learning how everything works still. If you haven't already and wish to do so, don't forget to give me a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel. This helps YouTube to push my video out to more viewers like yourself. Again, thank you. See you all next Thursday.